I love this show, man. Like anything that I think I may have got quibbles on, I'm just finding myself diving into this time. I love the tone, the aesthetic and the visuals of the show so well match the overbearing,
Great
sort
aesthetic.
of claustrophobic, and like, I mean, just excellent set design. The performances are awesome. The cast is amazing. Is this the most innovative sort of like dystopian story that we've ever read? Not necessarily, but I love the character work that goes into it. I love the way that you believe this, you buy this world. Welcome, friends, to episode 320 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss the first 5 episodes of Graham Yost's 2023 series, Silo. We're back. We've had some interruptions here and there, some from the Vault episodes, but we are back to the grind now. And we're excited to talk about this show. Yeah, the grueling grind.
The grueling grind of watching excellent sci-fi and...
Yeah. We're down in the bottom in the engine room, just toiling away at the rotor, trying to make sure it keeps on going.
Yeah, the down below. What was it? There's the up toppers and then
down deep,
down deepers or something. Yeah,
I think so.
Man, I'm back from Scotland. I am wearing a tartan for the Elliott clan that I got. It was a fun time. I am full on in that guy who just went to Europe and is insufferable about it, at least for another week or so. But I went for Worldcon, the World Science Fiction Convention that was in Glasgow, and had an excellent time there for that. Really cool stuff. Got to be on a couple panels talking about podcasting. Met a bunch of great people, some other podcasts in the space. So shout out to anybody who might have met me in Scotland and might be checking this out for the first time.
So onto the subject at hand, this Silo series. I've already seen the show. The coming into this project, I was always excited to cover this, and I mentioned some last week. I met the author at a convention.
Yep,
and,
Hugh Howey.
Hugh Howey, very cool person. This show, like I had seen the show before I met him, and I was just like, oh my God, I love the show. It's so cool the way that they built this world, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on it because I just love good sci-fi in the TV space.
Yeah, and Apple seems to be willing to take chances on stuff right now in the sci-fi space, which I'm really excited about. Like, I love that there's somebody out there doing that. Not saying they're the only ones, but I just keep seeing Apple, taking swings on stuff, doing adaptations too.
And I've been saying this for a while, but it feels like just Apple and Amazon have a lot of money to throw at projects because they don't exclusively operate in the content space. And you're seeing some stuff like, HBO, Discovery bought Warner, which like that whole HBO acquisition and everything. And they're doing some stuff over there that they were kind of the prestige network for a long time. HBO, like decades, and still have great stuff, but I feel like here and there I'm feeling like some faltering, maybe some chinks in the armor over there. And Apple, I think, is willing to fill that space because they're like shows like this and Severance, and they just they're taking big swings. I think Foundation's on there as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So those aren't cheap shows to produce, and you can tell by the production quality of this. I mean, just the set design, the all elements of the filmmaking process in this show are really, really high.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get to this. I do want to pump the brakes just for a moment. There's a couple things I want to get in before we really dive into it. First off, a little bit of like housekeeping. Essentially, we are coming up on our next quarterly project. That's going to be like whenever we're done with Silo, that'll be coming up. So if you'd like to suggest something, the way to do it is to go on our Patreon. It'll be the pinned post. You don't have to be a patron to suggest. You just comment on it, and then you can like stuff by heart, like giving it the heart. From all the things that have been commented on that pinned post, the things that's like the 4 or 5 that get the most votes will be a dedicated poll, and that will be the first week of September. And that will be for patrons only. So at that point, you're going to want to sign up for Patreon, and you can cast your vote on that. And that'll determine what our next project is. So if you want to get your voice heard by us and get us to cover something that you're excited about, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, it's always fun. Some serious projects that we've been asked to cover. Some fun ones that are kind of just out there. Some things we would have
We
expected.
did Twilight from it. We've done. I think Pride and Prejudice was a Patreon pick. So people I think have often got us out of our comfort zone, which we always welcome. It's been very cool, so definitely check that out. Speaking of being in Scotland, I was itching to read and cover something like set in Scotland, and my wife was pushing for Outlander, which I know is an adaptation. It's been around for a while. She's like, oh, you should go do the first season. You know, it's TV, so it's a little trickier for us, but like we're doing it now with Silo, so it can be done. So yeah, if Outlander's one you guys really want to hear, let us know. Maybe vote for that. We usually only do movies on the Patreon suggestions, but if it was Outlander, we might find a way to do it because again, I'm kind of itching for something set in Scotland.
Well, did you remember during our coverage of Train Spotting, like were you thinking of Glasgow a lot?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay,
when I was in Glasgow, I was thinking about, and then also Poor Things with Alistair Gray and his connection to Glasgow. Really cool stuff. You know, I was thinking about so many different things that we've covered and talked about, and then of course, like obviously anything that is like that European fantasy. Tends to have a lot of connections to Scotland and like its look, the castles, the countryside, the highlands, and like all that stuff. I was geeking out about all of that, but yeah, we can move on now, move back into Silo. But I just wanted to mention that it was a really, really fun time.
Yeah. So you haven't seen this show before,
right?
We've only read half the book. We should talk about how we're going to cover this.
Yeah. So we read the first half of the book, intending to like do the first half of the book, do the first half of the show, then return to the book, finish it out. And finish out the season, assuming that it was like a 1-to-1. But you told me after we read the first half of the book, it was like the first 3 parts, which was roughly the first half, that was the end. Like it came up to the end of the first season. So I was like, oh shit. So we're gonna wait to read the second half of the book until the very end of doing. So right now we're doing the first 5 episodes. Next week we'll do the second 5, and then we'll return, finish out the first book. I will be curious because maybe it does jump around in time a lot. The book does even. The show definitely does. So I'm wondering if a lot of this, because there's a lot more story here in these first 5 episodes than we got in the book. You know, and kind of a reverse of what you normally see from an adaptation. So I'm wondering if more of these details will get filled in as we continue to read. I'm curious to return to the book for that.
Yeah, like I told you, the show, I think I've seen it confirmed that the show pulls in stuff from other books in this first season.
That makes sense.
To have some threading for possible into the next book and everything like that. But
cool.
I'm excited for the end of our coverage here because questions that I've had since I finished the end of season 1 will finally be answered. It seems in the second half of it might get some answers for what all is going on because I guess we'll get there next week when we talk about the end of the show.
Right.
Because that'll then line up with the end of the first half of the book that we've read. But yeah, so just in general, let's get our general thoughts out there. Right. Tell me what you think about the show in comparison to the book and just as its own piece of sci-fi fiction here.
I mean, it's cool so far. I'm enjoying it. I can see why people like this show so much. I do think it starts really strong. I think the first 2 episodes are the strongest of the 5 we watched.
The first episode I remembered being struck by.
Yeah,
when
incredible.
The show came out, I just like on a whim checked it out on Apple TV. That first episode, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I can't wait to see more.
And it's maintained a pretty good quality level. It's not like it really dipped. It's just the ones that followed weren't quite as engaging, but it's definitely kept me interested, kept me hooked. Especially if I didn't know anything, like if I hadn't read what I had from the book. I think there's enough mystery to pull you through. And I'll be really curious to see how the back half of the season lines up. Like does it build on that? Really curious. But great performances. Some uneven stuff. Some stuff that looks better than others. If we wanted to get nitpicky about the look, but I think overall very good looking show. I'm really having a lot of fun with this. Again, we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago when we covered the book. This is my bread and butter. Like I love dystopian sci-fi. I love this kind of storytelling. It's so bold and sort of I don't know. It's a cool thing to try. Like outside of doing secondary world fantasy, where you're saying this is a whole new world and I'm going to teach you everything about it. Something like this is a really big swing because you're asking a lot of people to imagine an entire society that is different than ours and has its own rules and its own religion, and people are operating in a way that is familiar but very, very different at the same time. And I think it's pulling it off well. So overall, very impressed. I don't think I know anything about the showrunner, so I am curious to know more about him. But coming back to the show now, watching it a second time, are you noticing anything different? Like, how are you feeling about it this time around?
Well, so I saw the show, and then we read the first half of the book that covers the entire show, and now I'm getting to watch the show again.
Yeah.
And I love this show, man. Like anything that I think I may have got quibbles on, I'm just finding myself diving into this time, and I'm just like, I love the tone, the aesthetic and the visuals of the show so well match the overbearing,
Great
sort
aesthetic.
of claustrophobic, and like, I mean, just excellent set design. The performances are awesome. The cast is amazing. Is this the most innovative sort of like dystopian story that we've ever read? Not necessarily, but I love the character work that goes into it. I love the way that you believe this, you buy this world, and like some of the cultural stuff that they've built up, and the way that like history has been wiped away from them. So they've like kind of developed this like branching sort of culture
They
around living
really
in a silo.
thread in this mystery about like what's going on in this world that clearly is a remnant of Earth, and yet these people don't know it, and there's so much mystery to them, and like that doesn't sound like it would be as engaging as it is, but like how we got from our Earth to this version of Earth is a really interesting question. And what exactly is going on? What are these like powers that be, the founders or whatever it is, controlling everything? Who are they, and what is their goal for doing this? There's so many questions, and it is really interesting to track what we got answers for in the book early on, and what has remained a secret even thus far in the show. And we can talk about that as we go, and like why they might have made those choices, for the different mediums.
And you were talking about like engagement. I think one of the most engaging things about this is, like we talked about last episode with sci-fi and this sort of dystopian sci-fi, you get to make commentaries about this past Earth, and about some of what's going on in our world can have parallels to what's going on in this world, even though it seems so dramatic in comparison. There were some things from the book that had special emphasis, I think, in the show and played up even more, especially in the first episode. And we can get into that in a little bit. But
yeah.
I just think that I'm so happy that this sort of sci-fi is being created.
Absolutely.
Such attention to detail, and I could see so much more story like sprawling out of this as it goes on. And interestingly, we talked about Hugh Howey a lot last week, but in my research, I found out that he was involved from the very beginning with the show. He was sitting in the room with Graham, who was the showrunner and series creator, and the other writers as they plotted out the beats for the pilot and each of the 10 episodes. Usually Howey was the one suggesting big changes and deviations, and Graham was like, quote, "Let's stick to the book. It was a great dynamic because I've always been open to adapting for the new medium."
That's cool. I love to hear that, like an author sitting in, and I've often said like this can sometimes be an opportunity to return to a story and reimagine it and change some things, and not necessarily because you wish you had done them differently, but just it's a chance to do it differently, and to recognize maybe it'll work better in this visual form. So really cool to hear about him doing that. Guy continues to be living the author dream, it sounds like, if he's got the ability to and was welcomed into the writer's room in that way. It's really cool.
We talked about it some last week, but just for people who haven't checked that episode out yet, he self-published a short story, and then it just was like one of the most popular short stories ever published in that way, and then kind of set the stage for a lot of other people to do similar kinds of things.
I think it was like a series of short stories, and I'm not sure at what point they really took off, but then he kind of got through this Kindle Unlimited program, and he was like one of the first best-selling authors using that platform, I think, on Amazon. So yeah, really blew up, and then he got a big time deal, and has written multiple books in this series now, and is killing it.
And just to talk about him accepting the deal too, from what I understand, he was like kind of turning down huge publishers who, after the story had become successful, he was turning down all these publishers because he was really invested in like holding onto the rights and kind of figuring out the right time to get it created. And clearly this seemed to have worked out for him. But there's a fun journey that we can talk about in order for it to get here, because it wasn't smooth sailing the whole way.
Okay, interesting.
So first off, let's talk about the showrunner here. Graham Yost is a Canadian film and television screenwriter. His best-known works are the films Speed, Broken Arrow, and Hard Rain, and the TV series Justified and Silo.
Wait, so he's the guy who did Justified?
He was the showrunner for Justified,
Wow, okay, cool. I'm
Yeah.
a fan of Justified. I haven't seen, I think there might have been like a really recent reimagined season or something that came out, or like a return that I haven't seen, but otherwise I think I've watched all of Justified.
Justified's awesome too. Like I liked a lot of Justified.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, it had some uneven seasons, but any show that goes on as long as it did is going to have that.
Really cool. Like, I mean, the highs in that show were really high.
Yeah, characters are great. Yeah,
yeah.
Awesome action moments.
Also,
Very cool.
Speed. He's wrote the screenplay for Speed.
That's so
Keanu Reeves.
I
Yeah,
do like
what a
Speed.
wild
I
one to
mean,
work on.
that's a wild movie in general, but it's got a fun premise.
It's like a Die Hard to me. Like when I think
Yeah.
about it, it's in that same kind of space where it's
90s
like
action,
I would have.
just like-
I mean, how much fun is that to have created though?
Yeah,
Like
very
regardless
cool.
of how, if you feel like it's like elite level cinema or whatever, like that's
Yeah.
a fucking fun movie, and
Yeah.
it's cool that like he was involved in that.
Yeah, you just gotta jump that bus over that gap.
Yeah, you can't. What was it? 60 miles an hour or something?
50.
Something like that.
I think can't go
Yeah.
under 50 miles an hour. Yeah, Sandra Bullock and Keanu.
I mean, fun premise, clearly
Yeah.
worked out. You know, everybody, I feel like everyone's seen that movie. So, you know, props to them. Yost wrote for the TV sitcom Herman's Head and the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. In
Whoa.
2002, he created the
Band of
television. Yeah, Band of Brothers is great. He actually goes on to work with Tom Hanks and Spielberg on The Pacific as well. So just
cool.
working a lot with HBO. So yeah, in 2002, he created the television drama series Boomtown, which I actually haven't seen that.
Sounds familiar.
He created the short-lived NBC drama Reigns in 2007, and then, like I said, he teamed back up with Tom Hanks and Spielberg to write and direct episodes of the HBO miniseries The Pacific. Yost is the creator and executive producer of the FX series Justified.
Mm-hmm.
He was an executive producer on the FX show The Americans, which that show is also awesome. I like that show a lot.
I've heard lots of good things. Never seen it though.
Yeah. In 2016, he took over as head writer and executive producer of the Amazon Studios series Sneaky Pete. So yeah, we can talk about the journey of Silo and how he came to produce it and showrun it. But it's pretty interesting that he worked with a lot of those major networks that had like the prestige television, HBO, and then Amazon Studios and into Apple TV here, and FX specifically. I think this show Silo was being developed as an AMC show. And then I think AMC Creatives went on to create it, but also was like funded, distributed, and like backed by Apple TVs. And then so they kind of absorbed it and it became an Apple TV thing. We'll talk more about that. But I just think it's really cool to see that Yost, like he has high level of, prestige television pedigree there with all that stuff he's worked on.
That's an impressive list, man. Like I'm a fan of a lot of his work and I didn't even know it.
I knew you were a Justified fan, so I thought you'd be excited about that. So to talk about how we got here, the project's development was announced as a feature film at 20th Century Fox, which entered negotiations to acquire the self-published ebook Wool by Hugh Howey on May 11, 2012. 5 days later, 20th Century Fox acquired the rights with Ridley Scott and Steven Zaillian among those attached to produce. On November 28th, it was announced that Jay Blakeson was in negotiations to write and direct. It was then announced on June 5th, 2015, that Nicole Perlman would rewrite the screenplay with Blakeson no longer involved in the project. The film was ultimately shelved as a result of the acquisition of 20th Century Fox by Disney. So you can understand how that could be frustrating for Hugh Howey, who obviously was excited to get that made.
It's just like, we talk about this all the time, how it's just a miracle anything ever gets made. And like whenever you hear these, like the history of these things, and like so many times, like this could have just never gone anywhere. Like that could have been the dead end, and we hear about it all the time with adaptations that are in the works, and they start to get made, and then somebody leaves, and somebody changes hands, and a new exec comes in and decides they don't want it anymore, and stuff just dies. And yet, every now and then, one survives or gets repicked up by somebody else. So yeah, I'm curious to know how it did end up happening here.
Yeah, so it was 2012. It was being, it was optioned by 20th Century Fox all the way to 2015, where they have some directors, and then up until now we're at June 30th of 2018. So we're already 6 years into this development hell. A new iteration of the project was in development for television at AMC with LaToya Morgan attached to write under her overall deal at AMC Studios. The series eventually moved to Apple TV on May 20th, 2021, receiving an order for 10 episodes. Graham Yost to replace Morgan as creator and writer, marking his third series at Apple TV under his overall deal with the network. Morton Tildum was also attached to direct and executive produce with Yost as the showrunner. So I actually found an AMA, which is like Ask Me Anything on Reddit, if you're familiar with that, where people were asking Hugh Howey questions about, I think this is like a couple episodes had dropped, because that's kind of Apple's model, is they drop like 2 to 3 episodes and then they go weekly.
I like
which
that model.
I appreciate. Me too.
It's the best of both worlds. You get a little bit for the people who want to binge, and then you can make it appointment television.
Hook me, and then I'll come back, weekly to schedule time around that. And it keeps people talking, right? Like I think we found that like production companies and just like distributors in general are like when they put something out and it's like everybody loves it, but they only talk about it for a week. Like that just does, like they spend like hundreds of millions and millions of dollars, and then people talk about it for a week and they're like, yeah, it was great, but they don't watch it again. Yeah. They don't engage with it for longer. So this, I agree, this model's cool. So there was a question to Hugh on this AMA. My question is, what made you decide that Apple was the right fit for Wool? Did they offer you the most creative freedom? Hugh Howey responds, "At one point, I was down to Apple, Amazon, and AMC. All three wanted the rights, and I was hiking around New Zealand weighing the pros and cons, taking calls with each. Apple hadn't launched their network yet, so they were a big unknown, but the passion was extraordinary. For me, it came down to them and AMC. I went with AMC because of the relationship I was forming over the calls, the shared vision, and their storytelling excellence. Apple never gave up. They asked AMC to partner up. I celebrated this as it meant I got 2 out of my 3 top picks. We combined the storytelling brilliance of the folks at AMC with the huge support of Apple, in quotations, who are also brilliant at crafting story and played a massive role here as well. It was the best of all possible worlds."
Cool. Yeah, man, that was it's lucky that it worked out that way, and we got a good show out of it. So, and another season is coming. I think since we started covering this, like it got a release date, which is in like November. I think you were telling me. Not really lining up with our coverage very well, but it's all right. We're getting it in. We're getting it in beforehand.
Yeah. We're looking at November 15th, 2024 for the release of this, and it'll run through January 17th of 25.
Wow, okay, yeah. Let us know if you want us to return for season 2.
And just as we're kind of talking about it here, I did see that Rebecca Ferguson said in an interview for season 2, she mentioned that seasons 3 and 4 are kind of being floated right now, and that's the plan right now, is to do 2 more seasons, and then it would end. Okay. And if they do 3 and 4, they're going to shoot them back to back. So, smaller windows of waiting between them. And honestly, this came out in 2023. We're getting a new season in 2024. This is pretty quick turnaround for a show of this magnitude.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, like, as big as it is, the fact that it's very contained, I think actually probably lends itself to the shooting process, because there's not a lot of different sets you're going to. It's you could probably do most of it on a studio or in a studio.
Yeah. So from what I understand, as far as the sets that they have set up, there's like 3 floors, and they've built a lot of this. So they have like the spiral staircase, they have a lot of like different rooms and stuff like that. But if you consider all the different like areas where they're setting up like sets,
I guess I meant like locations. They're not having to go to all these different locations. Like it's probably all in one place.
It pretty much is all in studio spaces. Yeah. But supposedly the production designer said they had to set up 70 different sets. Wow. So it's all within these different spaces and stages that they set up. But I mean, again, the craftsmanship of like the actual set design was what stood out to me in the show.
Yeah.
And then just the way that they were able to kind of marry that tone with the source material. Yeah. Like the visual tone.
Yeah, and they did a great job of kind of showing different character for each area and like different cultures within that have, cropped up, and it feels like a lived-in space in a way that I think you have to do in a visual medium to like sell it, and they did a good job with it.
So we've done this in the past, but the way that we're going to kind of keep ourselves honest on the timer here is we're actually going to set a 10-minute timer per episode, where I will read the summary, then the timer will start, and then we'll try to stick to that as close as we can. But this will help us not go 2 hours for 5 episodes of 5 hours of television we have to talk about here.
Yeah, it keeps us from being too wordy, which we can sometimes be.
All right, so episode 1 here is called Freedom Day. In a massive underground bunker called the Silo, a community thrives without knowing their history, as records were supposedly destroyed 140 years earlier during a failed uprising. Sheriff Holston Becker tells Deputy Sam Marnes that he wants to go out. 3 years earlier, Holston and his wife, Allison, received permission from her doctor to remove her birth control implant, but they were unable to conceive. During this time, Allison learns subversive beliefs about the Silo from Gloria Hildebrandt, a fertility expert, and helps IT expert George Wilkins explore a forbidden hard drive dating from before the rebellion. Allison tells a skeptical Holston that those in power are lying to them, and that the view on Silo's screens of a dead outside world is fake. She offers evidence, her birth control implant that was still implanted, and that she removed herself. Allison declares that she wants to go out. The mere utterance of these words is strictly forbidden, and the inevitable punishment is permanent fulfillment of that desire. Allison promises to clean the Silo's external camera if the outside is beautiful. Following the Silo's pact, Allison is dressed in an environmental suit and exits on her one-way journey. Silo residents watch Allison clean the camera and then collapse, seemingly dead. 2 years later, Holston investigates George's death and meets Juliet Nichols, an engineer who claims he was murdered.
All right, man. Yeah, this episode, as I said, this might be the strongest of all of them, but I thought this was a really great piece of storytelling. I love this, part of the book as well. But seeing this here, they kind of expanded it. We got to see much more of the relationship between Alison Becker and Sheriff Holston. I kind of fell in love with them in a way, and seeing their journey and their attempt to have a child, and the slow realization that, you know, they're probably being manipulated and lied to, and then how that affects Alison Becker, who was brilliantly played by Rashida Jones. You know, I thought this was all really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I thought that the relationship was so excellently portrayed. David Oyelowo as Holston Becker as well, like their relationship, the way that you felt that they really wanted to have a child, and like the tragedy of what we learned with.
I did want to shake him some though.
Yeah,
he was like, because you could tell he loved her, but like he was so slow at times to like listen to her and to like get on board. But it's understandable because like this is all they know. This is their entire world.
He's also like the voice of
the sheriff
of control.
He's the one who's supposed to be enforcing these rules, and then his wife is actively breaking. And she calls him out at one point. She's like, you don't sometimes you don't listen very well. Talking isn't listening.
Yeah, and you fall in love with that Allison character, Rashida Jones.
Yeah, she's great.
So quickly, and you're like so pulling for her, and like you can understand that I'm watching this for the first time before reading the book, and like how shocking all of this is along the way, and how heartbreaking, and it's compelling storytelling, and that relationship, and quite a few of these relationships are really cool. Common is so intimidating in the show. Just let's talk about the cast a little bit here. We also meet Tim Robbins, I think next episode, but he might have
he might have an appearance here. I feel like a lot of the major actors just like show up for a moment, just be like, "Hey, I'm in the show too." Yep. Like Rebecca Ferguson absolutely is like that. You see her for a moment,
but you kind of know she's on the cover of the show as you click on it, so you know she's going to be the main character.
She's going to be important. Yeah, I love to see Will Patton. Will Patton is somebody who I've enjoyed for years, and he always plays these characters that like you end up falling in love with. Like he plays likable really well, even as he can sometimes have this edge to him, or he can be flawed.
He's got that old school look at the world too, though, like where he's like rough around the edges, not somebody I might necessarily get along with at all times, but he's got like the old cop vibe down for sure.
Yeah, he's playing that to the T here with Marnes, who is that kind of character in the book as well. And so I was so happy to see him. I had no idea he was in the show. So I was very, very happy to see that. Very excited.
I want to talk about Rebecca Ferguson, even though she's not a huge part of this episode, just so we can talk about the cast at once. She is incredible in this, and she's great in everything she's in, but she carries the show. She, in every way, is like a total star at this point. Like she was in Dune.
Oh, absolutely.
She was in like some of the Mission Impossible movies.
Man, she's so fucking cool in Dune.
And she's just great in everything.
If you haven't heard our Dune coverage, check that out.
She's, again, I saw that this show was a thing, and I saw that she was the lead, and that's what sold me on it. And then she kept me there. She's excellent.
She is going to be. I think I've shared this with you, but she was announced to be the lead role in the. I don't know what they're calling it, but it's the First Law books by Joe Abercrombie. Yeah, they're getting an adaptation. I think Best Served Cold is the particular book that's getting adapted, and she's the main character in that. Which she's going to be incredible in that. So I really, fingers crossed, talking about like how anything's a miracle if it actually gets made, but like hopefully that actually happens, because I would love to see her in that. Yeah, and I also kind of love how her character, like in this show, starts out as a minor role that like builds into being the main character kind of thing. And same thing in the book. And, it's cool. It's like that part of it's right out of the book, how like it kind of transitions through multiple characters who you think might be the main character, and then it doesn't work out so well for them before we finally land on Juliet, who is the main character. Tim Robbins is great. Like his performance in Mystic River will like always stick with me. He's amazing in that. He's been great in a lot of stuff. I think. Are we not going to talk about Shawshank if we're talking about Tim Robbins? Absolutely. Let's talk about something we've covered. Absolutely incredible, man. I think the one for me that is a little uneven is Common. I like him. I just think he tends to play this kind of role a lot, and he's kind of become a character actor in that way. It's like we got somebody who we want to be kind of intimidating, kind of a rough edge to him. Maybe he's got a little bit of something going on, but he kind of just stands there and broods a lot and looks menacing. And that's what he's doing here. Now, again, we're halfway through the show, so he might surprise me as we continue to go. If we'll return to him. He has a big moment in the 5th episode we'll talk about. But overall, for me, he's been one of the slightly weaker performances. But if that's the weakest performance, then we're doing good, because overall they're all good.
So what do you want to talk about in the first episode? You want to talk about some of the fertility stuff, because that's a huge thing that I felt like was emphasized here that I appreciated, and I was like, man, this is a great analogy for kind of what's going on in our own world, and so hopefully something that will make somebody think a little differently about the subject and what it actually is. Yeah,
anytime you got government control over people's bodies, over women's bodies, and it just goes to show how that is a lever of control that authoritarian governments will wield. It just is, and that's what's going on here. And absolutely, I mean, I was definitely thinking a lot about, a lot of the issues we've been facing in the U.S. Lately. And overall, I think there's a lot of parallels you can find. We talked about this last week. That's one of the great things about post-apocalyptic storytelling is it kind of takes everything and it turns it up to extremes, but you can look at, like, this is a cautionary tale about where a lot of this stuff can go. I mean, you go back to 1984 and a lot of these books that sort of laid the groundwork for this kind of storytelling. Fahrenheit 451, to go back to a very early project for us, and how they can be powerful stories that can have lasting effects. And it is always cool to me. It's something that I'm interested in. I think there's always going to be a place for dystopian storytelling like this.
Another thing I wanted to talk about too, with our 3 minutes we have left here, the way that the I want to go out is played in the show is so heavy and so terrifying.
And
the way that
I commented on that in the book, how I was, oh man, I can't believe that, that's so harsh that if you just say the words, then you have to do it, and it's that's a death sentence, and they really nailed that in the show.
Total control. It's just the playbook of controlling a community of people, right? All across the board, we're seeing it. And these characters just they have had their history stripped away. So what we have, if someone's trying to take away freedoms, is we can look to history and say can't repeat these things, and this is sort of a part of the playbook. And yet these characters don't have that background, so they're trying to figure it out along the way. I love that there's a character that's figuring out that the stars are moving in the sky and stuff. They're rediscovering science, and I love that that's human curiosity. We'll rediscover some of the things that even if it gets wiped away, we might rebuild in that way, at least that knowledge base.
I love the world building in this first episode. It had to do a lot of heavy lifting of establishing what the silo is, what it looks like. We get a lot of travel up and down. We kind of see the distance here. We learn about a little bit of the society and how it exists, and what people do and don't know. We're starting to get hints of it. It's not all laid out for us. A lot of that is this meeting with the computer repair guy. What's his name? George or something? George Wilkins. Yeah. He's a really interesting character that I think he's in the book, but he just feels like so much more of a minor character than what we're getting here. We're getting a lot more of him, and clearly he's been on the path of learning a lot of stuff, and that ends up getting him killed in a mysterious way. And there's a lot of question about what's going on there. But yeah, this first episode, again, it does the thing it needed to do, which is sell to us that Silo is a real place, and with characters who have, recognizable real human trouble and emotion, and that we're gonna want to follow.
Yeah, a couple of things I think we're going to want to touch more on as we go on is the hard drive. And I want to talk to you about a theory that I've had that I mentioned last week that I still don't have an answer to, that is how could a hard drive 140 years later, if it was pre-rebellion, carry on? Maybe the data was transferred to a new hard drive along the way. But that's one thing I want to touch on. And then also we see someone go out for the first term. We see Allison go out. Yeah. And the process of her, she said she would clean it if it was beautiful, and then she cleans.
Yeah. I like that. She explicitly told him, if I'm right, I'm going to clean it. So that was a message to him, which is really fucked up, because, it's kind of amazing he lasted 2 years before wanting to go out there, because according to what she said, she told him, it's green out here.
Yeah, and we see her sort of continue on and then kind of stumble down as she falls, and then she's a fixture out there that he has to try to avoid in his daily life for years.
So the timer has gone off. Yeah. We got to move on to our next episode, but luckily this is all part of the same story, so we can return to things.
So episode 2 is called Holston's Pick. Holston learns from Juliet that George, her lover, collected forbidden historic relics. Upon learning that George and Allison work together, Holston agrees to investigate and promises to send Juliet a signal when he finds something. A few months later, Holston leaves the silo and is shocked to see that the outside is lush and beautiful like Allison claimed. He cleans the camera, takes off his helmet, and on camera appears to crawl to Allison's body before dying. Mayor Ruth Johns learns that Holston left behind a statement nominating Juliet to be his replacement as sheriff. Juliet knows that George was looking for a door and tries to retrace his steps in the watery dig space underneath the silo.
Very cool episode. The real introduction of Juliet, which is very cool. There's so much that the show is doing in the second episode that really is building the overall story that we're going to tell. This is a really good one. It continues to build this mystery of what's going on outside of the silo. We can talk maybe a little bit here about how some things are different. He basically tells us right from the jump. It's at the end of the first chapter, essentially, that we read, what's going on in the fact that she is seeing one thing, or that Holston, when he goes out, he's seeing green, but when he takes off his helmet, he sees the wasteland. And so we get the implication that there's been this kind of illusion essentially through the screen. It's like VR, AR, I guess. Yeah, it'd be AR, where it's showing you something that's not real. And that's what everybody apparently, when they go outside, is being shown. He sees that, pulls it off, and dies. In the show, I think it's unclear what he actually sees when he pulls off his helmet, because we get it through the other side. We get it through the cafeteria viewing it. So we don't know why he dies, because we see him see the green grass and the birds, pull off his helmet and die. So that mystery is sort of outstanding in the show. What do you think about that choice? Because it seems like a pretty big one. And why do you think it was made?
Well, I just think that they're keeping the mystery alive. I kind of know nearing the end of the show what they're keeping secret for now. So okay. I would just say they're keeping a mystery alive. In the book, it's talked about they're constantly talking about these screens, and we come to find out that possibly there's a screen in the mask, and that happens in the first chapter of the book, that there's a possibility that there was something being projected for the people. So that's where I'll leave that, and we can kind of touch on that again.
I said I felt as a savvy sci-fi reader, I was expecting there to be some sort of lie about the outside world. And right. I thought it was clever that he sort of subverted that, and the lie that I thought was going to be revealed, for a moment, that the world was actually fine. He plays with that, but then shows that it actually isn't. And I think for readers, that works. But I agree with the decision to change that up a little bit when you do a show, because the show is, by definition, going to appeal to a wide audience. It's not only going to appeal to people who are diehard sci-fi fans. And even among diehard sci-fi fans, I think there's an appetite for this. So I don't think you're going to lose them. And I don't know, it just works better in the show to prolong that mystery. And they kind of play with it a little bit, kind of have it both ways a little bit. So yeah, ultimately I like the decision. Yeah,
I thought it was really cool. And you start to get more of that in another episode as well, that idea of is the outside world inhabitable or not? And Holston, the interesting thing about Holston is that as they're, and maybe this happened with her as well, but you can tell that they're really taping on the joints and the areas so that you can't get out of the suit. But Holston is able to pull the helmet off. Yeah. At the end there. And I think that's something notable.
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't necessarily get a reason why, but he did do that.
Yeah. It's also obviously, because we've seen the first half of the show, we see that the screen that they are all looking at is a projection. It's something, it's not like they're seeing through a window, they're seeing a screen. So it can be manipulated in whatever way they want. And I think that that's important to keep in mind.
We, as we go on, realize they don't know anything about this kind of technology. The average person does not understand that this is a possibility.
Yeah, and that actually brings us to that drive when George is going through the drive with Allison, and George has some stuff that goes on in this episode that I feel it's relevant here.
Yeah.
They're clicking through the files. They spend a lot of time looking at it, and there's schematics for the silo. There's all this stuff, and they click on one, and it's a video of an outside world. It's lush. There's birds in the sky, a lot of that kind of stuff. So a lot of those little tidbits being laid.
And that we hear about this secret tunnel at the very bottom, which this isn't something, to my memory, that we've really gotten in the book so far. So all this stuff down at the bottom is new here. It's interesting, right? They go down, there's this area that they think predates the rebellion. We see Nichols take the sheriff. This is before he dies. It's like in a flashback. Down there, we see them kind of bonding in a way that we didn't get as much of in the book.
They discover something from that George left them, the wire, that I thought was really interesting. They follow that wire to the drive.
Yeah, they find these relics. Which we actually haven't heard much about relics in the book. I mean, outside of maybe the drive, because that does get mentioned, but like we see like a Pez dispenser thing. And so yeah, there's these hints of our world existing. And yeah, the secrets being sort of uncovered by George. And what all did he uncover? Because he left like a note that said that like he found the thing he was looking for. And I think at this point still we don't know what that is. So I'm interested to see what that ends up being.
I mean, this is some of the stuff that I found most interesting even before I read the book, and the book not giving us information on that makes me feel like maybe this is some further book information, like a later book. Or later in the first book, in Wool. And I love this stuff. When she's down there with George and we're getting their relationship, you kind of in the same way as Allison and Holston, you fall in love with their coupling a bit, and you can kind of see their relationship and see the kind of people that they are. And then she keeps going down there and having flashbacks of their time together. But seeing that massive drill, especially like the spectacle of what that looks like, and they're like, this is the drill that possibly dug the silo, and they just left it down here, and then it's restricted. And there's work lights all in there. That looks so cool. And I'm like, that's the stuff that I'm like, that's huge lingering mysteries that I can't wait to have answered.
I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was when we went to New York City, we were learning about the subways. And they literally did that with the subways. Like they dug them, and the machines were too expensive to get out, so they just left them at the end of the tunnels that were dug. And I wonder if that was an inspiration for this, because I immediately thought of that when I heard, it was like they just left the machine down there. That totally makes sense that that's what they would do.
It's definitely possible. I know that Hugh Howey, as far as the AMA was saying, he currently lives in New York City, so he has like maybe a connection. But I think he said that he wrote this like on boats and things like that we talked about last week. He sails the world, so it was interesting in the AMA too to hear him talk about that a little bit, and how like he's kind of like, he still loves sailing. They have something planned to sail, or they did have something planned to sail across the Atlantic, but currently with all the TV stuff, he has another possible show being adapted as well, and he's kind of been working on a lot of that kind of stuff. And he's like, when these like once in a lifetime opportunities come up, you got to work in the TV space as I'm able to, and then kind of like do the sailing at some point. So
yeah, we had read how he wants to like go around, he has to sail around the world. Like
that's what he mentioned. Yeah, circumnavigate. He still said that he wants to do that. So that's pretty cool to know. Oh, also to say this, if you're a fan, he has said that he's going to write more books in this world. He's going to write more sort of Wool, whatever this trilogy is called. He's going to.
I think it's called the Silo series.
Okay.
I think that's the name of the series overall. Could be wrong about that, but I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, real quick, while we still got a few minutes in this episode, this is also like the introduction of Juliet and her being given. Ultimately she's tapped to be the next sheriff. And I think she says no at first, resists the call to action, but then ends up accepting it. And classic call to action for a hero that we get here. But it works well, and we see her being super capable in her space, and her caring about this generator, which we'll get more to in a future episode. But a lot of cool setup here. So the way this episode ends, with her sort of, she takes this rope down to the water, this massive amount of water, and she drops her headlamp into it, and she's like dangling above the water, and then it kind of cuts. I don't know. I didn't love this ending. It felt a little contrived to be like like we're gonna try and have this little hook for next time, but I didn't think it was as effective as other hooks we've gotten. And I guess next episode, I might have been conflating some of what happens next episode with this one when I was saying episode 2 was really strong, because episode 2 is strong, but I think I was thinking a lot of the stuff with Mayor Johns and Marnes that we're about to get into episode 3, and that was actually some of my favorite stuff. So I'll modify a little bit what I said earlier.
So the timer did go off. I just want to mention, I actually liked, and I think this is also an effect, I think Apple knew they were going to only release 2 episodes. So the end of the second episode is her down on the bottom of that rope, like cutting away, and then you have to wait a little while. So that's like a true cliffhanger for a future episode.
It's kind of empty though, because like at the start of the next episode, she just climbs up.
I know.
It's pointless.
I get it, but I do think it's fascinating to note
and
too.
Also,
like
why
that's
was she even down there? I don't know.
Well, it emphasizes that like of course people in the silo can't swim, right? Like there's this big body of water down there, and I thought that was like I find that to be really interesting. Again, I'm just like fascinated with all the stuff that goes on.
And yeah, I've only seen 5 episodes, so I'm like, I assume more is going to happen with this space. We're going to learn more about it. We're going to come back to here. We've been back several times, so.
Episode 3 is called Machines. Mayor Johns and Deputy Sam trek down 144 levels to meet Juliet. Along the way, Johns meets Juliet's estranged father, Dr. Pete Nichols, and Juliet's engineer friend, Martha Walker, for opinions on Juliet's character. Despite the disapproval of Judge Meadows, head of Judicial, and Bernard Holland, head of IT, Johns offers Juliet the role of sheriff. Juliet initially declines, but changes her mind when she's given Holston's badge, which has the word truth carved on the back. Juliet requests that Johns allow the main generator to be switched off for repairs, which has never been done in living memory. At shutdown, the silo screens briefly show a healthy green view of the outside, although no one seems to notice this. With difficulty, the mechanical team successfully fixes the main generator. Before leaving for her new job, Juliet asked Walker to study a camera she found among George's relics. Importantly, this summary doesn't say it, but they don't know what it is. Not that they know that it's a camera.
Right.
And then Marnes and Johns confess their love for each other before Johns collapses with blood in her mouth.
All right, so yes, you reading that summary, I got a lot of this episode mixed up with last episode, but a lot of what I really liked in this show so far happens here. Episode 3, also very strong. Marnes and Johns. I don't know why their two names are like kind of similar in a way that I always get the two confused. Those two characters are excellent in the book, and I really love that they're very good here. They have chemistry. They're adorable in the way that they are flirting with each other as they go down. And again, I love these actors. So I thought this was really good stuff. We get to see more of the silo, and it establishes sort of the distance here. The one thing I will give the book props for that I think the show has sort of dispensed with a little bit and is not as interested in conveying is the physical distance and difficulty in traversing these stairs and all of these levels.
Yeah.
Because this is like a brutal climb for them in the book.
Yeah, and they talk about it in the show, but the characters aren't fatigued really.
And also like characters just do it willy nilly. Like later on, characters are just popping up from the bottom to the top, heading down to the bottom. They're just there in the next scene. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that. It doesn't bother me
too much. It's like late Game of Thrones where it's like
exactly.
Characters are jumping all over the Westeros, and you're just like, how? It's
in
like,
TV, right. You're just not as interested in it. I do love that in books, like authors tend to think about that stuff and like try and convey it because you want to convey realism in a way that I feel like you almost don't have to as much in TV. And maybe I'm wrong in that way, but like I feel like at least TV people are like, you're gonna buy it because I'm showing it to you, so they don't feel the need to like justify it. And in fiction, you kind of want to convey the body, and you want to convey like this is a really hard thing to do, and it's it conveys.
It's very
distance.
internal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more internal, but also film and TV by default is like a time medium, right? Like it has to do with like there's this weird thing where you can have one scene to the next, and there could have been a passage of time, and they don't necessarily have to indicate that, which is also kind of.
But
where
like you said, no one ever seems tired.
There's some liberties that are taken. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's like that one guy, Hank. He's eating all the hush puppies, but he's not tired. And he just climbed all 144. Yeah. Levels. So
also maybe they're just all in incredible like stair climbing shape. I guess I don't know. They should all have unrealistically large thighs. I think
huge calves,
constantly climbing stairs. Yeah.
But yeah, man, this is a great episode, and it ends on a really good actual cliffhanger with the Mayor Johns has collapsed in the bathrooms with the blood all down her mouth. Like that was a shocking moment. And again, I'm assuming as someone who watched for the first time, like how was it seeing this scene?
I mean, insane, right? Yeah. Like this is the stuff where I'm like, oh, this is a character that I loved. They built up this relationship. Maybe I should have known that this was coming and that like it was going to be a big gut punch.
It's definitely one of those shows where you're going to start thinking like, if I like anybody, they are not long for this world.
It definitely feels a bit that way. Yeah. One of the things that they're juxtaposing this with too, but I thought this is an extrapolation, I would say, from the book, because this whole generator situation needs to be fixed, and then they're closing, so we get this whole situation where they shut it down for 8 hours. Everyone's in darkness. The cops are kind of trying to like patrol and make sure everyone stays in their homes so that there's no rioting or anything crazy like that.
It was an exciting sequence with the repair and her. This is a real demonstration of her being brave and selfless, and also like her trusting her shadow. So even though she isn't super trusting of people, we show that she can be, and she can get there. She can be a mentor. She can be a leader. It does a lot to build up Juliet as a character, and being an interesting bit of world building. All that being said, it's a little hokey at times. It's like, I don't know if I completely buy all of this stuff that's happening. It gets a little wild, but I ultimately don't care. For the record, it was an exciting sequence, and I don't mind it. It was fun.
Yeah. I thought it was well shot.
I'm sure like actual
cut.
engineers who like really know a lot about how generators work and shit would probably get a lot of problems with this, but whatever.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, it just seemed like, of course it would, it seems like it would, that centrifugal force would kind of be thrown off by
that part, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the way it's repaired, her, climbing into it and spraying a hose. Also, every time they show her, she's like in the room, like cranking something, and that's how she's like fixing it. She's like the only one who can crank it just right, She's got to show off those biceps. And she's like,
cool.
How am I going to fix this? Well, I guess I'll get out my wrench, go in and give it a crank, and then it'll be good.
well, from what we understand, they say this in the conversation. She's adjusting it, so that, and every time she adjusts it, it like kind of throws itself.
But they don't even
balance.
say that at first. Like that's only explained later. We see her just get in there with a wrench and fix it, multiple times.
Right.
Again, it's simplified, right? Like this isn't The Martian. We're not trying to get into like how engines work on a really granular level. We're broad strokes here is fine.
Yeah. So I like that it was the editing with it was super tense, and then we're juxtaposing this with the lights being off throughout everything, so it's pretty spooky for everybody else out there. We don't know if the generator's going to come back on. They're romantic, intimate, It's
a different kind of moment. It becomes a strange situation, a moment where you can profess your love for somebody. I love the way all those things play together, and several times throughout the show they do that, where they find things to play off of each other. They have like some sort of resonance and like something thrilling going on over here and something thrilling going on over here, and they, even though they're not directly related, the energy is right for both. I
mean, I'm kind of a sucker for anything that has like a timer on it in a show or in a movie.
We got 30 minutes. Right. Oh, it's in the red. Yeah,
it's like, of course you kind of feel like they're gonna pull it off, but I think
that's why they have the shadow guy.
Yeah,
he's the one where I'm like, this guy might die. So like, even though Juliet's going to be fine, like they kind of act like maybe she's going to drown. I'm like, oh come on, she's not going to drown.
It's not even the drowning. Her skin would have been melted from her bone.
Oh, it's hot when she first goes in, and then the heat is no longer a problem at a certain point. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. It's like it's a little bit, fast and loose.
But it's exciting, and I think she's a true hero for that.
And it does show that she can't swim because she's really threatened by that rising water level, right?
Mm-hmm. Cool episode overall. I really like this episode. I like that ultimately where it ends up too is like that they're talking about opening a shop together. He wants to open a shop for his drawings, and she wants to open one nearby. And I'm like, that's so sweet. And we see them kiss, and like I'm like, you're so invested in this relationship, and you're like, Marnes can live another life after this grueling cop life that he's lived, and he's just burnt out. And then it just goes sideways pretty quick.
We also get the reveal here of all the different relics that George has collected, including like a little Statue of Liberty is in there, and like just a couple little things from our world. And it's just cool. It's like they're continuing to add these little details that just make us fascinated with the world. So judicial and IT so far in the book weren't as distinct as they are in the show. Like the show has sort of, in fact, like IT hasn't been as present outside of Bernard, who I think is the head of IT. But he doesn't like talk much about it. And really we've gotten a lot more judicial being sort of shady. And the people that Common's involved with. And that seems like a subtle difference, and I wonder if we're going to get there in the book, and maybe we just haven't gotten there yet.
In the show, you're saying?
Yeah, in the show, judicial is like this bigger force than what we've seen in the book.
I think that they're slow playing because already, obviously, based on where we are in the book. Like, I think they're slow playing the IT reveal. Yeah. And they're trying to make you think it's more judicial and saying like maybe IT isn't involved. And I think it's kind of a bit of a red herring. But also, I'll be excited to see what you think about the rest of judicial, because we do get is it the end of this episode or next? No, I think it's a later episode, episode 5. Where you learn that like there's something weird going on with the janitors as well. Yeah,
that we'll have to return to that because I'm still not sure what to make of that. That was interesting. But yeah, man, this is a strong episode. Ultimately, I think this is my second favorite, episode 3.
Yeah.
Clearly, I got a
Solid.
little confused there, but I think episode 1 probably still the strongest of these 5, followed by this one.
I like the relationship that you can see that Juliet has built with the people who work down in the generator as well, like the down deep people.
We get Ian Glenn here.
Walker.
Introduced as her father, and he's good. I like him and stuff. It is always jarring for me when someone has a really iconic accent to hear him try and do like an American accent. I think is what he's trying to do. It's like it just sounds strange when he's talking. I'm like, why don't I just have him do his accent? I don't know.
I think it's particularly shocking at first, and as it goes on, you get kind of lulled into it. But yeah, it is like
when
you
he
see
opened his
someone like
mouth,
that,
I was like, what? Because like he's an audiobook narrator. I forget what books he's done, but I've definitely listened to some that he narrated, and he just has such a great voice with this awesome accent. And so yeah, very strange for it to be what it is in the show so far, but cool stuff. I like him as a performer, so I was happy to see him.
One last thing, the screen flashing to a healthy green view when the power goes out. And it's clear that, like, in my opinion, you're seeing IT is like surprised by the fact that the generator is going down. They didn't have any idea.
Yeah.
And then that screen flipping to like lush environment versus like the desolate sort of wasteland look is just kind of that one of those clues. It's like, was that on purpose? Was that by accident? Is that truly what we're seeing? Is it not?
Yeah, definitely playing with that, fucking with the audience of the show a little bit too.
Yeah. So timer has gone off. Let's move on.
Let's
Episode
move on.
4 is called Truth. Ruth Johns is dead. Marnes believes she was poisoned and that he was the real target because they drank from each other's water flasks. Bernard, as mayor pro tem, swears Juliet in as the new sheriff. Juliet asks Marnes to help her investigate George's death in return for her helping him investigate John's death. Robert Sims of Judicial tells Marnes that Judge Meadows is ready to remove Juliet as sheriff, but Marnes tells him to let Juliet quit on her own. Later, Marnes is attacked in his apartment. Juliet meets Lucas, a resident who spends late nights in the cafeteria. Juliet finds Holston's file on George, but cannot find George's hard drive that Holston confiscated. In a flashback, Juliet leaves home at 13 after the deaths of her mother, Hannah, and brother, Jacob.
All right, this is a cool episode. Honestly, it's strong. I was intrigued by the flashbacks we get to a young version of Juliet. We see her running away from home, her relationship with her father. We get more of the explanation there. Father of the Year, really good job.
Yeah. He's like, "Are you happy?" And he's like, "Are you happy?" And she's like, "I'm waking up at crack of dawn and not thinking about anything." And he's like, "All right, sounds like you're happy. So I'm gonna leave you to it."
All right, I guess you stay down here then. Bye.
Yeah. That's my doctor professional diagnosis of your situation is that you need to be left alone by your family.
Although we still don't really know what happened with her mother and her brother because we saw a medical emergency going on, but then he was saved. So I'm sure at some point we'll find out more. Maybe that's gonna explain more of this because right now it seems bizarre the way her father's behaving towards her.
We'll get some more. And something that I've seen about the show, and if I was to say anything as like a small criticism, I do think that this show through 10 episodes starts to move a little slower based on the pacing that was like the first 3 episodes or so. The pacing does slow down a little bit. I think some of these flashbacks have to do with that, and like some of the ways that they're the investigation kind of twists and turns a little bit. I still think that overall I really enjoy the show and everything about it. There's just like a pacing thing where it's like I almost feel like if this was like 8 episodes or 9 episodes rather than 10, it would have had like very sharp.
Yeah.
But I also understand wanting to build out the world because you have the opportunity to. So, but some of this my point is some of this flashback stuff starts to bog it down, in my opinion, a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. We get a lot of her relationship with this Martha Walker character, who we haven't met to my memory in the book yet, or if she was,
I think
she was mentioned, but I don't think we got any extended scenes like this.
I think we did, but if you remember the character that was like turning on the sink and stuff in the book that I mentioned.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I think
but
that's
that wasn't the woman who was the fertility person, because she was the one who turned on the sink in the show.
Maybe I'm wrong. I thought that we had met her in the book.
Anyway, we definitely got a lot more of this character in the show because she is like a full-on mentor figure for Juliet. She goes to her. She's kind of a mother figure. She like tells her problems. She talks to her about all the things that have been going on. And it's an interesting dynamic.
I remember now. She runs an air compressor. That's what it was. Remember,
Okay.
in the book she turns on an air compressor.
Okay.
So I think it's the same one because she's kind of a tinkerer as well. Anyway, moving on.
Anyway, and apparently she's known her since she was a little girl. So she is truly kind of this mother figure for her. We'll see where that ends up leading in future episodes. But
interestingly, she hasn't left the workshop in 20 years. And in a place that's very much about like moving and porters and messages being sent. And she's like tapping into the radio, which Johns talks about early on, because Johns seems to have known her when they meet up.
Yeah.
They seem to have an older relationship.
Well, and I like to see Marnes and Juliet bonding here. Sad that it's so short-lived, but they make like kind of a cool little team up here. And she's like, oh, I think I got an ally, and like it's like, oh, yes, they're going to work together and they're going to figure this out, only for him to get jumped in his room and assassinated, which we don't really learn until next episode what happens, but he gets attacked. And we see the face of the guy who's attacked him, which I thought was an interesting choice, which ends up becoming important next episode. But there is a lot of like kind of twisty things going on with this investigation, right? And him getting killed here. I thought this was like a little nod to the readers, because there's a moment where it fakes out like he's going to hang himself. I don't know if you caught that. I was like, I don't know. I mean, maybe a show watcher also is worried he's suicidal, but it felt like a direct, like, hey, I'm going to kind of make you think this is what's happening if you've read the book, because that's what happens in the book. Well, maybe it's still suspicious, but it looks like he hung himself.
Right. Either way, I think that you think that he's going to. But yeah, the nod is clearly there for book readers.
Yeah.
But he ends up just hanging up like a punching bag.
It's a punching bag.
Yeah.
It was a funny little misdirect there. Yeah, and in fact, he's kind of a badass, right? And like he gets some hits in, when he gets jumped.
He also has a shotgun in his house, which clearly that's not something that anyone else has. I think they're all locked away.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you're supposed to have guns.
Yeah.
Is that
also notably, just for anyone listening, I'm noticing in the show that there isn't any gun violence for some reason. Weird. But anyway.
Yeah, they had a shotgun and they never shot it.
No gun violence in the show, and nobody has guns. Seems like if you don't have guns, no gun violence, even in a contained space like a silo. Interesting, yeah.
You're saying you're making the point here. It is interesting to note, though, that there was this shotgun and it didn't go off.
And I'm not necessarily saying that...
Are you saying it's Chekhov's shotgun and at some point it will go off?
Maybe. There's also a gun locker, which also is kind of a, dystopian sort of like government oversight kind of thing.
Sure.
If only the people in power have guns, then it's just a lingering threat,
Mm-hmm. So one thing that we've gotten a lot more of in the show is the Pact. There's a lot more talk of the Pact. We see that the Pact is both a religious document and the rule of law. And that's never a good combination to have. And the founders are both people and also religious figures that are worshipped. Like literally people thank the founders and like say prayers to them. That's not good. One could say that, having state and church not separate, bad. And the show is highlighting that. I mean, it's reductive, but like it genuinely, like you seeing the dangers of it. Like you just shouldn't do this.
Religion tends to be highly interpretive, and that's not what governing bodies and governing rules should be.
And it's too much power. If you grant, I mean, this is the divine right of kings, right? Going way back. Like if you imbue somebody with divine right, it excuses any sort of abuse of power, any sort of overreach, any act of violence and control is all excused if they are divine beings.
And not to mention like people who follow in a religion like that or follow someone like that, they will make, rather than making rational decisions, they may make emotional decisions. Anyway, church and state, separate.
Yeah,
that's
keep them separate.
We're making a hard stance here, yeah.
Oh, I thought one cool little detail was them talking about how Juliet's been named after a play. And then they're like, that play is no longer performed, like it's illegal now or something. And we don't really hear much about it, but I assume Romeo and Juliet, right? That's what this has got to be a reference to? Yeah, okay.
Definitely. And they say specifically, wasn't that written by a rebel?
Yeah, by a rebel, which is fun.
So
yeah.
interesting.
So
to think
anybody
about,
before the rebellion is a rebel now?
or just whoever they have designated, and I think obviously like attacking art and
Sure.
people
Censorship.
who, you know,
Yeah.
that sort of censorship tends to be another part of the playbook. So yeah, I actually thought that was pretty cool detail there as well. Yeah, because she's literally like, her name comes from something that is probably not okay by the founder. So her existence in general is possibly like an affront to the founders and
that makes me think of Station 11.
Yeah,
remember that?
Definitely. Yeah.
Talking about another post-apocalyptic and Shakespeare and how powerful that could be, and the fact that they are blocking that from them. Yeah, that really shows, why they would do that, right? Another favorite moment here was when Juliet is getting shit from, I forget what her actual position is, but she works in the deputy's office, and she's like a secretary / communications person, who's given her a bunch of shit, right? And she asks her like what people from down deep even eat, and she's like, children. Like, I don't know, I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, that's Sandy. She's a clerical worker who works for the sheriff's department.
Yeah, I love that moment. And of course, they end up kind of having a bonding thing that happens next episode. It's kind of like expected, but I always love like characters who, when they first meet, are at odds and then come to find an understanding and an acceptance of each other. Yeah.
Well, because you're seeing them like earn a trust or earn some level of respect, and like that's always in a character. You're like, okay, well, we also as the audience feel that way. So, I like characters who are skeptical too, right? Like, I don't want you to have somebody come into power and then immediately lick their boots, right? Like, you gotta be like skeptical and kind of like see somebody out and see what their intentions are and stuff. That is the timer. All right, so the next episode is episode 5. All right, so the next episode is the final episode that we're going to talk about this week. Episode 5, The Janitor's Boy. Sam Marnes is found dead. Paul Billings, Judicial's original choice for sheriff, is made Juliet's chief deputy. Sandy, who works in the sheriff's office, tells Juliet to find Marnes' killer before Judicial picks a scapegoat. Juliet discovers that Doug Trumbull, who works for Judicial, planted evidence to frame resident Patrick Kennedy for Marnes' murder. Sims tells Doug that his father was supposedly a janitor, but actually had a secret job that was crucial to the silo's survival. Sims kills Doug before he can be arrested, and Doug is posthumously blamed for Marnes and John's murders. Juliet learns that Lucas has been studying the cafeteria's display screens at night to observe the movement of the lights in the sky, silo residents being ignorant that these lights are stars. Walker shows Juliet that the camcorder's technology is more advanced than what is permitted in the silo. Juliet retrieves one of George's relics in the hopes of reopening the investigation into his death.
All right, final episode. This is a cool like investigation is at the heart of this. It's tracking down Marnes' killer. I will say this character what was his name? Doug Trumbull?
Yeah.
This guy he was gonna die from the moment I saw him. He's like so bland. He's supposedly shadowing, what is it, Robert Sims? But I'm like, this guy's gonna die. And then when he starts giving him the monologue, I'm like, man, you're so fucking dead. Like, I saw it coming a mile away. I will say.
We call that fodder. He's a villain fodder.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's this whole thing about like a scapegoat, and like this guy ends up being a scapegoat in a sense that he takes the fall for the people who are in charge of him. But it was still cool, right? Like, and seeing and I talk about that, like the way that it's edited and the way they use another event. They have this race from the bottom to the top going on at the same time that she's chasing him, and they're like running around, and of course they actually do interact with one another here. But I just thought that was edited well, and that you have this chase going on at the same time that you have another chase going on. Worked well.
And not to mention, again, a kind of a time bomb, time clock kind of situation here, because she has found the evidence that has been planted, which was the rat poison that Marnes had already identified was used to kill Johns.
It was very obvious. It's like rat poison and the picture right next to each other. Like, rightfully, she looked at that and was like, a little obvious here, guys.
Yeah. And it was cool the way that she kind of like, I like that she appeared where he was heading, and then she's like, what's going on? What are you looking for? This is the wrong place. And then he took off. I just like seeing Juliet be a badass like that and kind of outsmarting the powers that be, even though they seemingly have almost supernatural knowledge of all the stuff that's going on.
Almost like they're watching somehow, right? Because in they keep saying like, how would we be being watched, or how would they be listening to us? And I, in a way that I didn't appreciate in the book, I appreciate more in the show. They don't understand how this technology works.
They don't get it.
So the idea that there could be listening devices planted is not something they can conceive of with their understanding of technology.
Like, I think that they don't understand how small technology can be as well, because that's the big thing that comes up.
Because we learned that they're not allowed to have magnification after a certain point.
A certain amount, yeah. So, and we actually hear that Juliet's mother got in trouble for using double magnification, like using two magnifying glasses on top of each other to do surgery on a rabbit, I think we heard right away.
Yeah, so that's really fascinating. And that, again, it's a world building detail that clicks into place and that explains a lot. Also, in the pact, they are forbidden from mechanizing the passage between levels in any way, which is also fascinating. And I don't know any reasons why, because I have not progressed. I mean, I guess the book goes a little further, but it doesn't explain this. And this is the first I've heard this. And to me, it's just like another element of control, right? Another lever of control, another way to keep them separate, and to slow down communication, to slow down travel.
The main thing. I think the communication's the main thing, because we continuously see, and we've heard about the emails, that you can send them, but they're expensive. Like the technology exists, so the porters are the thing that are used, and that's not a very efficient technology when seemingly if someone had access to better technology, they could always be a step ahead.
It is interesting that they have computers and no magnifying glasses. I wonder if that works. I don't know. Not really sure. Don't know enough about it. Again, this isn't hard sci-fi, so maybe there are some holes here.
Well, and their computers are very much
and like maybe they don't know how they
DOS,
work.
Like
maybe that, you know what I mean? Like maybe this is just like leftover technology, and they don't know how it works, and they don't question it.
Which brings me to another point towards like how can all of this stuff possibly be 140 years old at a minimum? How can all these computers, because it's like they're recycling everything, right? They're recycling and reusing things that have been used. So I understand that, like,
So you're saying it's not that old, or you're saying it's older?
I just can't really comprehend how everything is that old. But again, that's just a theory that I've always had about this, dating back to when I first saw the show exclusively. It's just like, how can all of this technology be so old and still be, I know that, again, they're recycling, so they're reusing all of this stuff.
IT, and they are very protective. We hear about, very protective of their like repairs and stuff. I forget, there was some mention of that. So like, yeah, I mean, they must, whoever's controlling the technology and doing the repairs are the only ones who know how, and they're definitely keeping that from everybody else, it seems like. I don't know. Yeah, it's fascinating, and is it? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're onto something, but
because it's like there's a lot of talk of like how old Mayor Johns is, and she's like, there's 10,000 people in here, 5,000 of them have only known her as a leader. And then
so that was something Bernard said, which was fascinating, because he's like a
numbers guy.
He keeps like doing a lot of math. Yeah.
So again, that you're like, okay, so how far back, if there's no written history or whatever, if they don't have certain histories, how hard would it be for a controlling entity to just every generation or so, or just continuously throughout time, just get rid of discoveries and sort of knowledge bases and things like that, and just continue to wipe the knowledge base, rather than being like, we've started over and we're building back up, just continuously wiping it. And who's to say it's not like 3 generations ago or something like that? Although that's borderline 100 years, so I guess it depends on how you want to calculate generations, lifetimes versus generations.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we will find out more information about that.
I hope to. Yeah, that's the goal here.
So we do get the big monologue here by Common, and again, like I've been critical of him. I think this is pretty good. It's fine. He's definitely threatening, which he's supposed to be. Definitely drops some interesting world building details here. The stuff about the janitor's room, very intriguing. We have seen him be a father in another episode and might come and actually comfort his kid. And I liked that because it gave another element to this character who has otherwise been pretty one-dimensional and pretty villainous.
I think that that's a good reason to see that this character, whether you think this character is the big baddie and is in charge and controlling everything, or is he a means to an end doing the thing that he thinks is right.
I think the latter. I do not think he's the big bad. He does not know everything. He's definitely a cog in the machine. And so like, yeah, if that's the path we're going to go on, and it's going to be him learning the role he's played, and like, does he turn on people? Like, that could be really interesting. So I'm definitely leaving room for like, maybe this character will grow on me as we go forward. Excited to see. I know you you can't tell me because you know more, but I'm excited for that. One thing I also noticed in this episode, the look of the sheriff's area offices. I thought it was really cool the way they're like blending kind of a throwback kind of noir vibe to the offices, but yet it still feels futuristic in some ways too. I don't know, it's cool. And like, yeah, the cafeteria with the big wall is kind of futuristic, and yet the way the furniture looks and everything looks kind of old fashioned.
Everything's like made of concrete, which makes everything kind of dusty and like old looking in a sense. And I heard the production design team talk about like everything is circular, which I think is really cool because the silo itself is circular. So like window bevel, like the bevel on the edge of things, and like I don't know, handrails, everything's very rounded and circular. And yeah, I thought that like that kind of maybe lent itself to that futuristic look as well. And of course, like if you're doing a mystery with cops and investigators and things like that, like you have to, it's a noir story.
Noir.
At least it has the roots of noir in it in some capacity.
And we get more of this investigation stuff. Like there's just more of it in the show so far. A lot of this stuff kind of flies by in the book. And yeah, we don't get to see her being a sheriff as nearly as much as we do here.
No, yeah, that's true.
Part of it's because there's like time jumps. There's a lot of time jumps in the book.
Yeah, it seems that she's doing other stuff in the background, paperwork and other investigations, and there's this person doing this, and we kind of hear about it, but yeah, like you said, it's kind of, time's probably flying by. One other thing I definitely want to note is, in terms of like referencing, you mentioned like influence of noir. I know the sci-fi references kind of that are going on here are interesting too, because I noticed that the suits that they go into, that they leave the silo, look a lot like the suits from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that.
So like there's like, you know, sci-fi story, investigative story, like it's cool to thread, like if you're going to tell those kinds of stories, I like the roots of that kind of being relevant and referenced in ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, you know, this sort of ends on just adding another layer to the mystery. We don't get a lot of answers thus far in the show. We've reached the halfway point. There's a lot of questions I still have. But I'm really into this, man. I'm really into the show. I like these episodes. I guess I also haven't mentioned how the intro is really cool. Like literally the intro sequence that plays. I love that it shows, like, there's a moment. First off, it looks like a bunch of ants, right? At one point when it's showing other people, but then also the helix of the spinning stairs turns into like the helix of a DNA strand.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I don't know if it's just fucking with us or what, but it's like adding layers of mystery. Like, wait, what does that mean? Does that mean something? You know, I don't know.
I've always taken it to be like, and again, this comes down to, I heard the makeup department talking about the show, and they were talking about how like the tattoos that Juliet has on her arms, there's nothing natural about them. They're not like nature or like floral or like roots or anything like that. It's like very geometric and hard lines and things like that. So these people they're not aware of the things that we maybe take for granted in our life, which is the natural world around us.
Although there are a bunch of apple trees during that one funeral scene,
the farms,
which I thought was like, okay, I guess it's like a ritual, but like everybody taking a single bite of an apple and then tossing it in, I'm like, it seems pretty food wasteful.
Well, once
do we have that much food to go around?
Maybe that's a great point. But once they bury it, obviously a tree will grow out from underneath.
I guess a bunch
on top of them, seemingly, maybe a bunch. Yeah. But yeah, the intro kind of evoking nature and the natural world and things like that, and things that are being like physically like taken away from these characters and suppressed in this community, in this society. I thought it was a cool way to like you said, an ant colony, the way that like they kind of are, without even realizing it, similar to the natural world out there. Yeah. Or what would have been out there.
It's cool, man. I'm really into this. We have run out of time on our episode timer here. So I suppose we should start to wrap up. We are going to be back next week with the final 5 episodes, and then we'll come back the week after that to wrap up the book. But if you enjoyed this episode and our coverage of Silo, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you thought of these episodes, and let us know in the form of a rating and review if you are on an app where you can leave one of those. They're very helpful. Give us 5 stars and shout out this coverage in particular.
And be sure to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. We're all over the place, at Ink to Film on all those platforms.
If you'd like to support this podcast monetarily and you'd like to be able to vote on the upcoming project, the next project, you're going to want to go over to patreon.com/inktofilm, and that's where you can find all of the bonus content that we offer. Our most recent bonus episode, what did we record? Help me remember.
Solaris, the 2002 George Clooney film.
Right. Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. So if you're curious about that and any of the other bonus episodes that we have recorded, check us out on Patreon.
Yeah, and that was kind of a follow-up to our main feed. That's what we kind of do over there. Is we'll do some like ancillary or adjacent projects that are similar to things that we covered in the main feed. Alternate, yeah. Thank you to Russ Bogdan for the use of our intro and outro music as well.
All right, that's going to be it for this week. So until next time,
keep adapting.